Hey, George.
John, hi.
How you doing? How's your summer going?
Pretty good. I guess we're doing another holiday edition here of Science Saturday.
Yeah.
4th of July.
So right, by the time this comes out, I guess it'll be 5th of July.
Oh yeah, that's right. Tomorrow, Friday's the 4th, isn't it? I don't pay much attention to it.
Well, actually, today is Wednesday, George, so that would mean 2 days from now is Thursday.
Oh, I was thinking it was Thursday. You know how the summer Doldrums edition.
Yeah, the days all run into each other.
Yeah. Hey, I just got, I guess last week, my latest edition of Wired magazine.
Yeah.
And I picked it up, and the cover said, in big letters, "The End of Science."
Oh, for God's sake.
Question mark. And I thought, wow, John must be, there must be something by John in this, because, you have a patent on that, right?
Yeah, so you probably thought...
Or a trademark or a cop. That's your phrase.
You thought somehow John is conned Wired into letting him recycle his tired old argument once again.
Yeah, well, I didn't think it's so tired, but I thought maybe they were republishing the book in a special edition of the magazine.
Well, I haven't seen that issue. The only reason I know about what's in it is because John Brockman, the literary agent who runs the Edge website,
right,
sent out this essay by Chris Anderson, the Wired editor.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
The End of Theory?
Yeah, The End of Theory, except I think it said The End of Science on the cover of the magazine.
Yeah, well, maybe that's supposed to be more provocative. But
but The End of Theory, that was it, by Chris Anderson, and I just thought it was one of the most interesting things I've read in a long time, even though I didn't agree with its main thesis.
Oh, good. Well, we can talk about it. So I read the piece on the Edge website,
mm-hmm,
and it had all these other little mini stories that were attached to it, I guess, trying to flesh out with examples what Anderson is talking about, and then some responses from various Edge people. So, do you want to summarize it, or should I? Or
I'll dive in.
Okay.
In a way, this is what we were actually... I was talking about this last time, how, the fact that after all these years of linguists and computer scientists working together to try to figure out a theory of language cognition so that they could train computers to translate languages, and making very, very little headway, that finally the problem has been, not completely solved, but, we've developed adequate translation engines just by companies like Google taking texts that are in Chinese and English both and feeding voluminous amounts of these parallel examples to networks of supercomputers and just throwing so much computation at them, petabyte computation, I guess, is the level, that the computer makes these correlations. It can translate the languages, but nobody really knows what rules it's forming. It's just like a black box kind of approach. And Chris Anderson was using this and other things like that as an example to argue that in the age of petabyte cloud computing, that the old hypothesize and theory paradigm of science was becoming outmoded, and that correlation is enough, so that you don't really have to understand, or you can't even hope to understand, really the science or the logic behind what's going on, but just you just do it.
So it
you
gives
just make these correlations.
It gives you prediction or various kinds of problem solving without necessarily giving you understanding, which would be very disturbing to lots of scientists. I would think. Understanding is the whole point.
Exactly. Yeah, and plus, it's not completely new, I don't think. It's new on this scale, but, my father was a doctor, and in just talking to him about different diagnoses he'd made, and so much it was just correlation without understanding any kind of mechanism. That's what a lot of medicine has been for centuries. You notice that certain symptoms are correlated with certain outcomes. You make predictions of what potions might might stave it off, and with very little understanding of the mechanism.
Yeah, and another field that's been using this for a long time is the insurance industry.
Oh, yeah.
So, and in fact, I just recently was thinking of switching my home insurance to Geico, which now insures my cars. And I called them, and they ran me through a bunch of questions about what sort of house we have and how close the local fire station is and everything. And then this woman said, "Do you own a trampoline?" And I was sort of taken aback. It just was such a peculiar question, I thought. And I said, "Yes, in fact, we do own a trampoline." And she said, "Sorry, we can't insure you." And that was the end of the conversation.
Wow, she just like hung up on you.
Yeah, basically, because I guess trampolines are associated with so many injuries.
Wow.
Kids visiting from another house or whatever. So they don't want to have anything to do with trampoline owners.
Yeah.
So yeah, insurance industry.
Yeah, but there's kind of there's sort of a mechanism to their thought there. You can kind of see the logic behind it.
Yeah, well, but it's based purely on statistics on
But they might have asked you like, what color are your shingles, and you say red, and it turns out that there's some, for completely unknown reason, a correlation between red shingles and more likelihood of fires.
Yeah,
and they could deny or increase your insurance rate from that. And that sounds like that's more of the kind of example of this opaque correlation-only science.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned that this reminded you of, or that these sorts of techniques have been used in other industries. The rhetoric that that Anderson was using, it was kind of this, it was sort of like Wired circa 1996. In a way, I was glad to see a return of this kind of rhetoric because it made Wired very exciting back then. But this kind of grandiose, techno-utopian language, and it reminded me a lot of the language coming out of chaos, the field of chaos in the 1970s, and the field of complexity in the 1990s, and of course from artificial intelligence. So all these fields also said that ever more powerful computers are going to revolutionize science, and particularly the science of complex emergent systems. I guess what Anderson, the sort of provocative twist he provided was that we wouldn't necessarily, so the chaos and complexity people were hoping that computers would lead to deeper understanding and explanatory models and so forth. And Anderson is saying that maybe that will be bypassed entirely.
Yeah, you just have the correlations in these black box. And that's what fascinated me. Like, John Searle's, the philosopher's old argument against AI, his Chinese room thought experiment.
Yes.
Where you have all these people sitting in a room, these clerks, and they have, this database of rules that they follow. And somebody feeds it a card with a Chinese squiggle on it, as Searle describes it, and then they put it in a certain bin, and then another one scurries over with a different squiggle, and just blindly following the rules puts it in another bin, and then the rules are good enough that this results in translating or understanding Chinese. And then Searle's argument that, well, that's what a computer that understood Chinese, quote unquote, would actually be doing, but it wouldn't really understand anything because none of the little agents would understand it, which kind of, I think missed the point because the whole system would understand it, would be the AI argument. But now what Anderson is saying, it doesn't even matter if you have any understanding even at the system level because all of the little rules might be completely opaque to anyone, even the designer of the system, that they would just come from pure induction through correlation, and you wouldn't really know what was going on.
Well, so what I think Searle would respond is, I recall the Chinese room experiment wasn't just about translation; it was
understanding.
about understanding. So having a conversation in Chinese.
Yeah.
So if you fed this machine questions in Chinese, could it give you adequate answers in Chinese? And he was saying that you could have an English-speaking person in there that would just be shuffling shuffling symbols that could do an adequate job. So the question is, I still think that there are no cloud computers, or whatever you want to call them, that are capable of passing the Turing test.
Yeah.
When it comes to, translation,
but maybe you go from petabyte to what's the next level? Exabyte? And
no idea.
Yeah. You go up another order of magnitude, and then
Zilobyte.
Maybe you will have that. But at the same time, it would just be symbol shuffling. But not only would it just be symbol shuffling, but it would be done by statistical correlations without any rules that we really had access to.
Well, so that's what some people in AI have been trying for a while, and this goes back to some conversations that I've had with you and with Eliezer Yudkowsky previously. It's just, it's a promise that hasn't been fulfilled yet, in spite of the massive increases in computation.
Yeah.
Let me just give you a couple of examples.
I think it's because I think things like Google's translation engines show that a lot of it is being fulfilled in this really interesting black box kind of way.
Well, first of all, I wonder if the Google people would say that this is really purely inductive statistical method. I would guess that there's a lot of human oversight. So you remember Deep Blue and how Deep Blue finally beat Garry Kasparov in the late 1990s,
right.
And a big part of Deep Blue's success was massive computation and number crunching and looking at all possible moves.
Yeah.
But they also had this team of chess experts who designed the search program to make it much more efficient.
Yeah.
And it sort of ruled out a bunch of searches immediately, and then it would explore some avenues that look particularly fruitful based on what humans know about chess.
Yeah, except
so it's kind of a combination of the two.
It's a combination, but I don't think, one of the, I think it was Kevin Kelly's comment on edge.org. He talked to one of these, the Google research director, and I think that's the same person who I heard at AAAS a couple of years ago describing this, Google's Chinese room experiment. And one of the boasts was that no one involved with the project understood Chinese at all.
Right.
They didn't. So they weren't. It wasn't like Deep Blue, where they also were incorporating the knowledge of chess experts. It was just purely inductive, and I'm not sure exactly what they mean by purely inductive. I mean, you have to have some sort of structure to do the induction. It's the old Kantian versus the British empiricists kind of issue, but.
Noam Chomsky once told me that he once bragged that he knew virtually no languages. So he has this is the greatest linguist of all time.
Yeah.
He's considered to have this really profound knowledge of language, but the only specific language that he knows well is English. So the question I would have about the Google people is whether, maybe they don't know Chinese, but I would assume that they are incorporating certain principles from linguistics. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe it is purely inductive.
The claim is that they're not, but I'm not sure how much, since so much of this is probably proprietary information. I guess it's proprietary information. How much has really been published on this, but again, just this notion that you could do something like that just through correlation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thought that this would end, that's the whole thing that I think everyone who really wrote a comment on edge.org disagreed with Anderson's thesis, that it would basically obviate hypothesize and test science, that it would obviate understanding nature, that you would just come up with these correlations and develop these models that weren't really models because you couldn't open the box and look inside, and that just, the whole reason that people become scientists is just to get that thrill of understanding. So I just don't see that going away. And I think George Dyson, in his comment, really kind of hit the nail on the head when he said that actually then we'll be studying these clouds and the Google translation engine. It'll be like this new seemingly opaque thing like the brain that we'll have to study that's incredibly complex, and we'll have to do experiments on that to try to figure out what it's doing, and so the scientific spirit lives on.
Well, I think that scientists will always try to extract some kind of understanding, whether it's illusory or not, out of these research programs. But a couple other things come to mind. First of all, in mathematics, we've talked about this before, there is an increasing use of computers for performing huge calculations that can't be carried out by any mere human in constructing computer proofs. That's been done for almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
And for some mathematicians, it's very disturbing because it bypasses understanding very often. So you've got, the proof, instead of, you've got these sort of logical, comprehensible steps, comprehensible at least for mathematicians, and then you get to the part that says, then perform, run this program, it spits out this result. And some mathematicians, I remember interviewing them for an article for Scientific American back in the early 90s, and some of them were very disturbed by this trend because of the fact that understanding seemed to be bypassed, and it turned.
So it's like the old New Yorker cartoon where the two physicists are standing by the blackboard and pointing to this equation, and then there's a step that says, and at this point a miracle occurs.
Right. But this is something that's sort of in the nature of certain kinds of highly mathematical science anyway.
Yeah.
So in particle physics, I mean, there are very few people who can really understand something like quantum chromodynamics.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly powerful, predictive
But again, they understand
theory.
The principles, and then they can design, and the same with these mathematical proofs, like when when they have to bring in the step where they do all this computer crunching, they have developed a theory and an algorithm telling the computer, just what to do.
Right.
And so that seems different to me from this purely inductive kind of science that the Wired piece is talking about, where you're not giving the computer really an algorithm, or its only algorithm is comparing a set of algorithms to compare these two languages and then to induce these statistical connections. And then you can't even say that you understand the instructions you gave to the computer. I mean, you do it just the most basic level. Just say, go forth and induce, and then it comes up with this whole another level of algorithms that may not be penetrable.
So I guess the interesting question is where this method will be really effective and where it won't be so effective, or where it might require lots of human oversight and input. I would think that I'd be really curious to see how these methods would work when applied to neuroscience, because neuroscience, one of the huge problems with all the ever more powerful brain scans that are being used for research in neuroscience, or electrodes that are recording individual action potentials, is that the amount of data that is generated is just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so a lot of neuroscientists are now teaming up with computer scientists or quants who are experts in information processing to try to get a handle on this.
Yeah.
But
so again, you can imagine feeding all of this, like results from brain scans or electroencephalograms or whatever you're measuring, and feeding that in, and like that's the Chinese, and then feeding in what the human is doing or thinking or saying or reporting to think, like say introspecting out loud while these patterns are happening, and then running these correlations that would so you could conceivably get the cloud of supercomputers to just look at the results of the brain scans and know what the brain was doing.
Well, this
again,
is
without
something
understanding much about the brain, although it might help direct you to.
This is something that Marvin Minsky has talked about. I talked to Minsky for a Scientific American profile. Again, this is early 90s, and he thought that a a theory of the brain might be like a technical manual for a television, except, orders of magnitude more complex. So you wouldn't have some sort of grand principle or even set of principles where you went, aha, that makes sense.
Right.
It would just be this extraordinarily complex numerical model that had a lot of predictive power, but wouldn't necessarily give you these deep philosophical insights.
So kind of like his Society of Mind theory, right? Where he has a whole bunch of different little agents that know how to do simple little things, and they work together in this sort of Rube Goldbergian fashion.
Yeah.
And then it's so complex with so many parts interacting with so many other parts and so many interdependencies that it comes out on a higher level of abstraction to seem like this mysterious thing we call thinking and understanding, but that it's really just like, as you say, a manual for a TV.
Right. Another thing that came to mind, George, and this is, again, something that we've talked about before, is, a question I think can be raised here is whether more data is always a good thing. So I think that's the assumption underlying Chris Anderson's essay, that we're just going to, that we have all these instruments that are generating higher and higher resolution data. I just mentioned brain scans as an example of that. And then computers will find new, interesting, useful patterns buried in this data. But there are some really obvious exceptions to that. So one that popped up in the New York Times just on Sunday had to do with CT scans for heart disease.
Yeah,
I don't know if you saw that. That was a really major story, and again, it's part. The New York Times is such a troubled place. It's had so many problems over the years, but they are just kicking ass on the limits of medicine and corruption in medicine, and this was a good example of that.
Yeah.
So the article was about how there's this tremendous growth in the use of computing tomography scans, these really high-resolution X-rays of the heart to detect heart disease. They're very expensive. The machines cost about $1 million each. The scans cost about $1,000 each. And we're now running up a total bill of about $100 million a year for these things. It's growing very rapidly. And there's no evidence that they work, that they actually save people's lives, except for very isolated individuals.
Yeah, but still, but that's the difference between research science and medical marketing, because you could still be gathering this data, say if you were doing it for reasons of pure research, or even if not, you could also take the data and put it into a big database, and maybe you would eventually find correlations between, like little calcium deposits in the arteries and an increased chance of. And in fact, the fact that they're saying that it doesn't work must mean that they've been doing these kinds of studies. So
that's true.
So some more data is helpful because it tells you don't need to take this test.
But meanwhile,
I had one of these too.
You had a CT scan of your heart?
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool.
You were asymptomatic, right?
Yeah, but this is when I did my big 50th birthday Mayo executive physical, and that was just part of the drill. So.
Well, this is a little tiny bit of a digression, and you're right that we're talking about the difference between commercial medicine and pure research. But I just have to note that I saw a story on the web. I plugged in Russert and CT scan, and Russert had a stress test just in Tim Russert, the NBC newsman who just died recently, of course, and he just had a stress test in April, but he had a CT scan some years earlier, and it really didn't turn up anything significant. But now there's a big surge of people demanding CT scans because of Tim Russert's sudden death. So everybody's suddenly paranoid, and really there is no there's no evidence that these things work if you are will help you if you are asymptomatic.
Yeah. No, and then it's obviously, a problem because these things cost so much money and it ends up being absorbed by insurance companies or by Medicare and leads to increased medical costs and all that. But that's kind of a different issue.
Yeah,
it's an interesting
somewhat.
One.
It's just that, they're part of the sort of wired doctrine, which I think Chris Anderson's essay reflects, is that it's very sort of pro-technology, that more instrumentation, more technology is just a good thing.
Yeah.
In general, and more computers, of course. But when it comes to medicine, that really hasn't turned out to be the case. So there was actually another article in the Times. I'll link to this.
No, I don't think what you said is really true, but go on.
I'll just finish
more
this point
technology in medicine hasn't been a good thing?
Well, let me put it this way.
Advanced surgical techniques?
So we now have by far the most expensive healthcare in the world per capita.
Yeah.
And in large part, a big part of that is medical testing and medical imaging, and we have the most sophisticated testing and scanners and so forth in the world. And yet we are ranked 45th in the world in life expectancy. So this was in a little piece in Science Times last Tuesday, I think it was, that was about a book that's complaining that our medical care system is run amok in large part because of over-testing and so forth.
Well, yeah, so, I don't disagree with that.
Well, that was sort of my point.
Oh, okay, but I don't see but I do think that having more technology is good. I mean, sometimes technology is misused, but when you think what they can do now surgically or for cancer treatment too, as far as there's just like survivable cancers now that used to be an automatic death sentence.
Yeah.
Or how they've been able to beat back HIV so people can manage it as a chronic disease and not an immediate death sentence. So. I think the technology is good, but then the marketing gets into it.
Well, I guess the question is how it should be allocated, because right now it's not being allocated wisely, and it's being the allocation is driven mainly by the profit motive of medical companies and physicians.
Oh, yeah. But
so we've got to do something about that.
Yeah, so you think socialized medicine's the answer?
Absolutely. Socialized medicine.
Yeah, but, whenever you're in England and you talk, people, everyone there who affords it goes to a private clinic so they can bypass the government.
That's not true. My brother is a very wealthy investment banker who lives in London, and he prefers the public health care to private health care. He could definitely afford the private health care. Yeah. He is so impressed with the national medical system over there that that's where he goes.
Wow, that's good. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, that's just one data point.
Yeah, I've heard people complain about it. But also when I was in England, people were complaining about how bad public transportation was. And I said, what? Have you ever been in the United States, especially the western United States, and you're complaining about the fact that you can only get a train every half hour from this little town to London?
Yeah, people are just big complainers wherever you go.
Yeah.
But listen, there's one other thing that came to mind with this. I actually was doing a slush pile search recently. I don't know if you ever do that. You've got these files where you just sort of stick stories that are kind of interesting and you don't know what you're going to do with them.
Yeah.
And you go through them every now and then. And I just did that, and I found a piece that was in the New Yorker it's 2005, and I think it's related to this Wired essay, the end of theory. It's called Everybody's an Expert.
Mm-hmm.
It's a review by Louis Menand of a book called Expert Political Judgment. How good is it? How can we know? So this book is by a Berkeley psychologist named Philip Tetlock, who actually did a 20-year study of more than 200 experts, particularly people who were sort of professional pundits in politics and economics, and he gave them questions about current events and asked them to make various predictions over this very long time period.
Yeah.
He had more than 80,000 data points in all, and you might not find these results surprising, but I think they're still pretty interesting. He found that the experts' predictions were actually worse than chance.
Worse than chance.
So he tried to generally separate if he was asking, for example, so some of this predated the end of the Soviet Union, or the end of apartheid in South Africa. So he was asking them to make predictions about those sorts of really big events, and he'd usually try to give them three different choices. And so overall, the experts scored less than 33% over time.
Wow, that's. I would have expected them it to be chance. They would perform the same as chance, but if they're doing worse than chance, it means they're actually getting it right, except exactly backwards. So if you took everything they said and did the opposite thing, you'd come out ahead 66% of the time.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and that's totally different from with stockbrokers. There's all these studies that show that basically they do no better than random, or no better than say the S&P 500, and it's just random which stocks they pick. I mean, not really random. They don't think it's random, but you might as well just throw the dart at the newspaper stock section and pick some stocks for your basket, and you have just as good a chance. But that's different.
This is how Menon sums up this study. Human beings who spend their lives studying the state of the world are poorer forecasters than dart-throwing monkeys who would have distributed their picks evenly over the three choices.
Yeah.
Isn't that a great... And he found there was a reverse correlation between knowledge and experience and prediction. And so the psychologist said that he thought that one of the problems is that these experts sort of develop a theory, and they want their theory to be as original as possible. That's sort of how they distinguish themselves from other experts. And then the more they know, the more they're able to cherry pick in supporting their pet theory, and the wronger they become.
Huh. Wow.
That's pretty broadly applicable, actually. Another couple of points that came out in this book. Hedgehogs tend to do worse than foxes. So this goes back to the old Isaiah Berlin's essay he wrote about the hedgehogs. And hedgehogs have one big idea. Foxes have lots of little ideas. So if you have a master theory of everything, then your predictions will tend to be wronger than if you are somebody who is likes to sort of focus on particular problems and find solutions unique to them, which
you'd expect
which makes
that.
a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Confidence was inversely correlated with prediction as well.
Confidence? So the more confident you are of your prediction, the more likely you are to be wrong?
Right.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking about... Actually, I've got to tell you, there's a great story that Menon repeats that from out of the book that I guess it's about an experiment that Tetlock was involved in with rats. So this was an experiment that was carried out at Yale University, and it was a rat in the maze experiment. So the rats basically were confronted with a choice. It was like a T-juncture, and food was placed on the left-hand side of the T 60% of the time.
Yeah.
But other than that, it varied completely randomly, left and right, but 60% of the time, overall, the food would be on the left.
Yeah.
So the rats very quickly figured out that most of the time the food was on the left, and so they'd always go to the left. So they'd be right 60% of the time to get the food. So then there are all these Yale students. They don't know where the food is concealed from them. They're just watching and seeing how the rat does, and they're trying to guess where the food is every time. They only guessed correctly 52% of the time because they saw these patterns, which of course weren't there, in the way the food was hidden on the left and the right, and so they created models and tried to guess correctly, and they did worse. Yale students did worse
than
the rat at predicting where the food was.
Then what was the conclusion?
Well, the obvious point is that this sort of supports Chris Anderson's point in the end of theory, that theory can be, he didn't really spell this out, but I think it's implicit in his essay, theory can be an impediment. First of all, you can infer patterns that actually aren't there.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the whole dilemma, right, of the human condition. You know, we're such great pattern finders, but sometimes we confuse our patterns for reality, and we become territory and.
Right, we become wedded to them. We
you can
ego invested in them.
Yeah, so you're marching bravely down a cul-de-sac for your entire career.
So, George, I think that this has disturbing relevance for the whole Blogging Heads empire.
How so?
I mean, what are we but a bunch of so-called experts who are supposed to know more than the average schmuck out there and are offering our opinions on various things.
Yeah.
But I don't know. This.
I wouldn't take us too seriously. You know, certainly if we're making any kind of predictions or things. You know.
That's true.
Yeah.
We're really entertainers more than I don't know, than
I
serious.
Suppose,
that people should be
best.
taken seriously.
Yeah.
Right, but that should be emblazoned.
Intellectual entertainment. That's what the business is about.
And of course, as this review in the New Yorker points out, that the whole point of a lot of the sort of television punditry and dramatic predictions is entertainment.
Yeah.
And so, if everybody was trying to soberly figure out exactly what was going to happen, you'd end up with these really cautious predictions that might be pretty accurate over time, but they just wouldn't be very much fun to listen to.
I don't think anyone takes many of these predictions too seriously. I mean, when you watch something like Meet the Press and get all these different points of view being confidently pontificated on the air, it's really, the fun of it is just, watching the play out of the marketplace of ideas and, watching the argument rather than each individual opinion or prediction. So,
well, then it gets serious when some of these people, you've got people like Dick Cheney. Coming on Meet the Press and other government officials.
The Grand Hedgehog himself.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're not just blithely tossing out predictions for fun.
Yeah.
They're shaping global policy and U.S. policy, certainly.
So with
based on their view.
With Cheney and Bush, it's like you have the hedgehog who's in charge of the fox.
Right. Or whatever Bush is. I'm not sure if he's even a fox.
Might be over, But as far as, thinking of a fox as kind of just mentally darting around and not having much attention span, just kind of, except if you have a hedgehog in control, pushing you in certain directions, and the fox has the power.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it can also, I mean, think about this issue, I think, is or sort of the whole question of prediction and using sort of gigantic statistical models.
Yeah.
Really has relevance when you're talking about the CIA, let's say, or intelligence agencies that are supposed to be looking at things going on in the world and trying to predict the course of events in other countries that can affect the security of the United States. And so then I guess, would you prefer to have cloud computing programs in sort of dominating policy?
Yeah, so the same kind of thing where they're making these, like say you're feeding in all this economic data, from all over the world and correlating it maybe with meteorological data or even astronomical data.
Yeah, because you never know.
Yeah, and then finding some, and then the computer will tell you, that it's time to say invade the island of Trinidad Tobago because of all these opaque rules that you don't really have access to. Just like you don't know how the computer's translating Chinese into English.
Yeah, I mean, should we turn over
that's not
government?
Happen, though.
Should we turn over government to cloud computers and get rid of all the politicians? Because certainly the politicians haven't acquitted themselves very well.
Well, it probably wouldn't be any worse, but I don't know.
You still need politicians,
Yeah.
sort of second guessing
Yeah.
the judgments of the computers.
But that when you have
replace public servants
with computers, with
servers.
with real servers. Yeah, that's why they call them servers.
Yeah.
But that's kind of something like when you get back to something like language translation, you have the opaque black box cloud computing going on, but you can very quickly verify that the results are correct or how correct they are. Where if you're doing it for something like predicting world events or how a country should behave in the political sphere, it's such a mushy. It's so laden with values and judgments, and it's really kind of taking it to a very different realm. But if it's something where you can correlate data and come up with predictions and show that the predictions are indeed true in some relatively limited domain, that's where I think you really the real philosophical problems kind of stand out.
Well, when you're talking about social science, you have to face the whole issue of black swans, the anomalous, one-of-a-kind events. So we were actually talking about this in our last chat. I think we got into economics a little while, and I was talking about some of these purely numerical models that did really well beating the market overall, at least for short periods of time, but they still needed a lot of oversight in case there was a black swan event, like a huge earthquake in Hong Kong, obviously something like 9/11. So you'd still need human experts.
You have to allow for those perturbations, but
that's right.
But otherwise, you exploit the inefficiencies of the marketplace and information not getting from point A to Z quite as less than instantaneously. And if you have a computer that's fast enough to jump in, you can siphon off a little bit of cash flow.
Right.
Yeah.
But when it comes to so I was thinking that you need humans to deal with the black swan events. But again, going back to politics, first of all, humans can't predict black swan events.
Yeah.
Either, and second, you could say, well, you need humans to deal with and react in a common sense way to black swan events when they occur. Computers can't do that based on purely inductive methods.
Yeah.
But if you look at how our country handled the black swan of 9/11, that wasn't such a good thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I really am thinking that maybe it's time to consider turning over everything. Just let Google run the world.
So it's really like the oracle. It's like the oracle at Delphi. Then, when you have the decisions made, and you can't unwrap how they were made and see what the process was, because there are just too many steps. It would take like a human being his entire lifetime just to go through a fraction of the steps that went into the judgment.
Yeah. I don't know. That could be the next big end of something.
Yeah, the end of
end
judgment.
Of politicians.
The end of thinking.
Now that's end of thinking.
Yeah.
Actually, somebody's got to write the end of books.
Yeah.
Or at least an essay, because it's just been overdone.
Well, let's see. I have the end of time on my shelves, and the end of politics, of course, and the end of history. I mean, Fukuyama's book, and there probably was an end of politics. There's the end of art by Arthur Danto.
There was the end of ideology. I think it was a very influential book by Daniel Bell, as I recall. That came out. That must have been in the 60s or early 70s.
Yeah.
Which is sort of what, in a way, it's sort of what Anderson is talking about as well.
The end of ideology?
Yeah, the end of ideology.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the same as the end of, the end of political theory.
Yeah.
Really. So let's just go with pragmatism and forget these grand utopian theories of everything.
Well, yeah, it is. It's like pragmatism. Yeah, it's scientific pragmatism, which is more like engineering than science.
Right.
Which is what he's really talking about. So it's more like, will engineering replace science when you don't really actually need theories, and it's all just kind of this really grand, complex cookbook. Well, there was some point that some of the commenters on Edge made that it struck me when I was reading the article that in a way this black box kind of science has been gone since at least quantum mechanics, where we had this theory. I think you said something about that too on Edge. That in some ways it works too well, because you just get these stunningly precise results from quantum mechanics. And you have a theory, but you don't have a mechanism, or not a mechanism that you can really picture.
So Niels Bohr once said, if you say that that you understand quantum mechanics, that only shows that you don't know the first thing about it.
Yeah, wasn't that Feynman?
Feynman said it. Niels Bohr said it first.
Oh, okay, and then Feynman.
And lots of other people said it after Bohr.
Yeah, okay.
So you've got philosophers who argue endlessly, including David Albert, who was just on Blogging Heads TV with Sean Albert, who argue endlessly over what quantum mechanics means, what it really tells us about the world. And
but it works anyway.
It works.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what physicists, the vast majority of physicists don't give a damn about the philosophical conundrums posed by quantum mechanics. All they know is that it's very effective in predicting experiments and in helping them design new gadgets, lasers, and
yet theory goes on.
Chips. Right.
So we'll have theorists who are theorizing about what the cloud computer is doing when it's translating languages or making economic predictions or whatever it's doing. And they'll be theorizing about this and running little tests, and it'll be just sort of like you're experimenting with the brain, except it's going to be something that's artificial that we created.
Yeah.
Wow. It's going to be. I think George Dyson was right that it's going to be exciting. It's going to be like the new the new 17th century. The scientific revolution all over again, but on this meta level.
It's so Anderson had the famous old phrase from Philip Anderson: "More is different." So Anderson is a Nobel laureate in physics, squalid state physics, as Murray Gell-Mann who wrote this famous essay. He's always been annoyed by particle physicists saying that what they're doing is more important than anything else in science, and so he wrote this essay, More is Different, about how each level of reality requires its own laws and its own explanations and understanding, and you can't really say that one level is more important or interesting than another. And Anderson uses that phrase to say that at this point you're getting such massive computational power, the petabyte scale, and we're soon going to be passing that you get qualitatively, not just quantitatively, different power of analysis. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm just, again, this is the same sort of rhetoric that you got sort of decades ago from the chaos and complexity people. And at this point, I just sort of, I want them, and it's already happened with Google Translation and certain things like that. I guess I'm looking for something a little more dramatic. So there was a lot of mention of genomics. And Craig Venter and what he's done with computers in analyzing the genomes of just zillions of different species, and that's all fine and it's really cool. But I'd like a really tangible sign of progress. Gene therapy, so far, in terms of its effect on medicine, the Genome Project has been a total bust.
Really?
Yes,
yeah.
Really.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, but not as far as understanding and theory, though.
Yeah, well, the understanding has actually gone away, gone in the direction of complexification.
Well, yeah, we talked about that once. I think, I don't know if it was earlier this year or last year, about how the more they look into the genome, the very simple mechanism has just been elaborated, and there's all these, it's just much more interesting even than it was before. And
Carl Zimmer has written a lot about that as well. But I still, so that's fine. There is understanding is, even if it is becoming more complicated understanding, that's fine. I'm just looking for these sort of tangible benchmarks, really good diagnostic markers for schizophrenia, for example, treatments for some of the complex diseases like diabetes, or better treatments for diabetes and cancer and so forth, and that has not come out of genomics yet. And so I'm a little tired of the all the chest thumping hype that comes from Craig Venter and other people like that. I'd like to see more medical progress from all their vast database analysis.
Yeah, but it's the first step, right? You have to get the database, and then you have to get the tools for analyzing the database. And so
we'll see. No, I will be watching it eagerly and reading about the latest advances in Wired magazine. So anyway, okay, have we basically squeezed all the juice out of that?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was just more struck by seeing what basically amounts to a radical view of philosophy of science in a popular magazine featured on the cover. So that to me was very exciting and just got my brain cells cranking in a way that I feel like I should write something about it. But it's something I've been thinking about ever since I saw that AAAS presentation on the language thing, and it's just been, kind of eating away at me.
Oh God, George, that would be a classic. That would be a great topic for you to do for Science Times. I hope you do.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yours will be infinitely more subtle and interesting than Anderson's, and that's no.
Oh, I don't know about that. I thought it was a really good article, even though I
it certainly
disagreed with it.
A lot of.
I mean, it was obviously meant to be provocative, and indeed it provoked some really great stuff on edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I certainly would prefer a cover story on the end of theory to cover stories on the iPhone or the movie Transformers, all the other commercial crap that Wired seems compelled to cover. But anyway.
Well, but every once in a while they just jump on some really, really big idea in an interesting way, like the long tail thing.
Yeah. That's what makes it. That's what makes it an important journal.
Yeah. I mean, I've been getting it for free for about 10 years now.
Really?
Yeah, back when Kevin Kelly was. I can't remember what his title was, but he was like the head
Yeah, he was pretty high up there.
Yeah, he was the head intellect at Wired, and at some point he put me in for a complimentary subscription, and I'm still getting it.
Wow, how nice. Yeah, Kelly finds me very annoying, so he would never do something like that.
Oh, well.
So anyway, well,
yeah, so I guess
we've got 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, anything else that struck you in the news this week?
Well, something that somebody just sent me a story this morning. So there are these sort of psychedelic nuts out there who keep me informed of every new little bit of research. And there's actually something pretty interesting, that a report that just came out from Johns Hopkins. Mm-hmm. So 2 years ago, Johns Hopkins gave psilocybin, the active ingredient of magic mushrooms, to I think it was 36 people in all, and there was a control group who got Ritalin, the stimulant, and the people who received the drug or psilocybin reported profound mystical experiences, sensations of oneness, bliss, and so forth. Yeah. There were also moments of terror and panic for some of them. Yeah. But overall, within a couple of months after the experience was over, the subjects rated this experience as one of the most important experiences of their lives, up with marriage and childbirth and first love and things like that, which is pretty remarkable. And this was published in a peer-reviewed journal.
Yeah, and also the people who were terrified, was that also? Did they also find it
that
important?
Was included?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, some of those.
That's interesting.
So these trips can be very long and complex. So there may be moments of panic when the drug is coming on that then give way to feelings of ecstasy. And actually, this is a classic part of certain mystical experiences in general. There's sort of the dark night of the soul, feelings of alienation and terror that give way then to sort of blissful union with, God or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So the Johns Hopkins people have been following these subjects and seeing how this experience held up over time and how it affected their lives. And the follow-up showed that the subjects still rate this a very important experience for them. They feel like that it made a permanent, positive contribution to their outlook on life. So this is just incredible propaganda for psychedelic drugs.
Hey, I think I may have had a computer glitch, so that I'll just be shown staring at the screen, looking puzzled for about the last 2 minutes of what you said.
Okay.
But I think that's okay, because they caught your side of it, and I started another video file now for for an ending, so they can hopefully splice this together. But
okay. What, GarageBand Science?
Oh no, next time.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought that's what you meant. You were gonna.
Oh no, actually, yeah. No. Suddenly, I thought I'd set my computer so that it wouldn't automatically go into the screensaver.
Yeah.
And it went into the screensaver anyway, and then I think it froze the recording on the last couple of minutes of the movie. So I started this new file.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I got a new computer, but I'm waiting for the home office to send me a camera to use with it. So I'm using my old computer. So these glitches should go away in the future.
Well,
but yeah, any concluding words there?
Nah.
Well, this was interesting. A nice way to spend a July morning.
Yeah, now we can just chill out for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, sounds good. 2 more weeks and we're on again, I hope.
I think that's it.
Okay, John.
All right, man. Enjoy it.
Sounds good. Okay, you too.
Talk to you later.